I paid the rent again that morning. The fourth time in 8 months. That's 4 times I've had to dip into what used to be my emergency fund. Now just a sad little safety net with the weight of our life dragging it thin. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I wasn't supposed to be 38, working 10-hour shifts under flickering fluorescent lights while begging a landlord not to hit us with another late fee. But there I was again, transferring money I didn't want to touch. Forgot again, she said. Tiffany, my wife. She forgot again. The online payment system was super confusing, she told me. I was going to do it, I swear, but I got distracted. Distracted. That's the word she likes to use when I ask about basic responsibilities. She's been unemployed for a year and a half, and somehow her plate is still too full. Full of what exactly? From what I've seen, mostly stream talk dance tutorials and aggressively filtered selfies for her Mediaverse account. Anyway, after that delightful start to my day, I worked a shift that felt like it took pieces off the end of my life. Understaffed again, which is just corporate speak for we're saving money by bleeding you dry. 10 hours, no lunch break, and a headache brewing behind my eyes like a pressure cooker. By the time I clocked out, the only thing keeping me upright was the promise of food and my bed. There was a gas station on the way home. Not exactly gourmet dining, but I was too tired to care. I grabbed one of those microwavable pasta things, a bottle of lemon lime water, and a small bag of mini brownies that for some reason reminded me of childhood road trips. I paid in cash. My card'd been declining more than I'd like to admit. When I got home, it was 9:45 p.m. The porch light was off. Again, I walked into a mess that hadn't changed since I left that morning. Dishes still in the sink, at least 4 days' worth by my count. The trash can was so full the lid balanced crookedly on top, like a hat on a scarecrow. The laundry I'd asked her to throw in the washer, just one load, that's all, was still in the hamper, now sagging at the sides. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and walked into the kitchen with the little plastic sack of hope in my hand. Tiffany was on the couch in one of my old hoodies, legs curled up, phone glowing against her face. I said, "Hey," and she didn't answer. I held up the bag like a peace offering. "I got something quick from the store," I said. "Nothing fancy, but—" She looked up, gave the bag a once-over, and wrinkled her nose. "Wow," she said, voice flat. "You really know how to make poverty taste worse." I just stared at her. Then she stood up, walked over, took the bag from my hand, opened it, and pulled out the pasta tray. She looked at it like it had insulted her personally. And then she tossed it into the trash can. Didn't even blink. "Try again later, she said, and walked back to the couch. I stood there in the kitchen for maybe 10 full seconds, listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant sound of some influencer's voice coming from her phone. I looked down at the trash, saw the unopened meal cram between a banana peel and a soggy cereal box, and I felt something loosen in my chest. Or maybe it broke. I don't know. That was the night I realized I wasn't a husband, just a wallet with a pulse. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just walked to the bedroom, changed into sweats, grabbed my keys, and left. No big scene. I don't think she even noticed I was gone. I ended up in the parking lot of a supermarket 2 towns over, parked in a dim corner under a broken light. It was 3:12 a.m. I remember because the digital clock on the dashboard was glowing too brightly, and I tried covering it with my jacket sleeve. Didn't help. Nothing helped that night. I sat there in the driver's seat, knees stiff, hands in my lap, and for the first time in years, I let myself sit still without solving anything. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I wasn't the dependable one, the provider, the rock. I was just tired, and maybe a little embarrassed that I'd let it get this far. 8 months. 4 missed rent payments. That's $300 in late fees. Not counting the missed utilities and the overdraft charges. Not counting the whispered excuses and the oops, I forgot again shrug that had started to feel like a slap. Every time she forgot, I remembered for both of us. I covered it, each time, until my emergency fund, once nearly $9,000, now sat at a whopping $825. All while she told me how exhausted she was. From what? From scrolling? They always say resentment builds slowly like water behind a dam. But that night, it wasn't slow. It was immediate, sharp, her voice ringing in my ears. Try again later, like I was a failed contestant on some game show. I could have laughed if it didn't feel like something inside me was bleeding. Funny thing is, I didn't feel rage. Not the shouting, throw something kind. It was quieter than that. Like the last light going out in a house you've already moved out of. The car was cold. I didn't sleep, just closed my eyes and thought about how ridiculous this all was. How I'd spent the last 2 years apologizing for being tired, hiding my stress behind tired jokes, cooking meals I couldn't afford for someone who saw my effort as disposable. I used to think if I just worked a little harder, stayed a little more patient, she'd come around. She'd get a job, clean up a little, care. But she didn't. And honestly, I think she stopped seeing me a while ago. Maybe even before the job loss. Before the excuses. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, watching my breath fog up the windshield. That night, I saw it all for what it was. A relationship where only one of us showed up. Where my time, my money, my peace were all used up trying to hold together something that only looked like a marriage from the outside. I didn't cry. I'm not a crier. But I sat there and thought, this is how people end up in those before stories I'm ready to share. Alone in a car, wondering how they lost themselves one compromise at a time. The convenience store meal. The trash can. Her voice. That was the moment I woke up. And I wasn't going back to sleep. The next morning, I didn't go home. I didn't go to work either. I called in, told them I wasn't feeling well, which to be fair wasn't a lie, just incomplete. I was feeling plenty. Mostly the kind of numb that comes after you've finally admitted the thing you've been avoiding for far too long. It was the kind of emotional hangover that doesn't make your head hurt, but leaves your chest feeling hollow, like a house after the movers leave. Instead of driving back to the apartment, I headed west. About 30 minutes out, there's this quiet little bank branch in a town no one talks about unless they're driving through it. I picked on purpose. Tiffany wouldn't think to look there. She barely knew where her own debit card was half the time. I walked in looking like a man who slept in his car, because I was. Hoodie still wrinkled, hair a mess, and a cup of burnt gas station coffee in hand that might have been doing more damage than good. The teller behind the counter gave me a polite smile, and I gave her honesty. I need to open a checking and a savings account. Just me. Private. My wife can't know. She paused. That smile faltered for a fraction of a second before it turned into something softer. Not sympathy, not pity, just understanding. I've seen this before, she said. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. She helped me set everything up. I made sure my new direct deposit info was squared away and left just enough in the joint account to keep the utilities on and avoid a bounced rent check. I even threw in a little cushion so Tiffany wouldn't smell the change too early. It wasn't about trickery. It was about giving myself room to breathe while I figured out the rest. I went to a quiet diner afterward and scribbled notes on napkins. Then I drove to my brother's place, crashed on his couch, and told him I needed a few days to sort some things out. Didn't get into the details. Not yet. But he handed me a pillow and didn't ask questions. For the next 5 days, I became a man on a mission. A financial investigator in his own marriage. It started with online banking. 6 years of joint transactions, every dollar traced, sorted, categorized. I pulled statements, highlighted patterns, created spreadsheets that would have made a CPA weep with pride. I made charts, notes, little tabs for recurring expenses. Color coding became my therapy. And what I found was illuminating. In the last year alone, Tiffany had spent $12,780 on apparel, cosmetics, and what I generously categorized as personal items. That's almost $1,100 a month. While I was eating instant noodles at my desk and skipping breakfast to make our grocery budget last an extra week, she was funneling money into fast fashion hauls and skincare subscriptions she never finished. Then came the kicker, $9, $500 in credit card debt. I didn't even know we had another card. She had opened it in her name, but had set up auto pay through our joint account for the minimum payments. Quiet, hidden, and very intentional. Apparently, forgot to pay applied to a lot more than just rent. I went full binder mode after that. I printed everything, tabbed and labeled. Categories like luxury versus necessity, unpaid promises, and income versus output. If I was going to end my marriage, I was going to do it with properly organized evidence. On the 5th day, I returned home. She opened the door like she'd been waiting for a knock that never came. The apartment looked different, immaculate even. Dishes washed, trash emptied, the smell of rosemary chicken drifting from the kitchen. My favorite. She was wearing that silk top she saves for when she wants something, hair done just enough to seem casual, and lipstick that matched her earrings. The kind of look that said I'm pulling out the stops, but pretending I'm not. The manipulation was so obvious, it was almost amusing. We sat at the kitchen table. She smiled, asked how my week was. I didn't answer. Instead, I placed the binder between us. Thick, heavy, filled with every receipt she thought I'd never notice. Tiffany, I said, calm as I could manage, I know everything. The credit card, the spending, the lies. I moved my direct deposit. There's still money in the joint account for now, but going forward, I'll be covering exactly 50% of our shared bills. Rent, utilities, groceries, car insurance. If you want spending money, you'll need to earn it. At first, she blinked, then scoffed, like I just made a joke in poor taste. What is this? She asked, flicking a finger at the binder. You're acting like some kind of accountant cop. I'm acting like someone who's finally done being used, I replied. Then came the waterworks. The trembling chin. I didn't know it was that bad. The hand reaching across the table. The voice cracking with promises to change. Next came the accusations. You're controlling me. This is financial abuse. You've always been cheap and pathetic. That last one landed with more honesty than I think she meant. And finally, the desperate scramble. We can fix this. Remember Brittany? She and Tom had issues, and they worked through it. We can do that too. I opened the binder and flipped to page 31. It was titled Job Hunt Promises and Excuses, 2021 to present. Neatly dated, categorized by the excuse. The market's slow. I'm still recovering mentally. They didn't like my vibe. Every one of them handwritten by her at some point. Most text messages. A few post-its. She stared at the page like it had punched her. I'm done, Tiffany, I said, not cruelly. Just honestly, I've been carrying this marriage on my back while you've been taking selfies and shopping like we're trust fund kids. I'm not playing husband to someone who sees me as a bank account with a beard. She didn't have a response. Just sat there, blinking, mouth slightly open. And I realized in that moment, she wasn't used to being challenged. Not like this. Not with receipts. I stood up, took my binder with me, and walked to the guest room, the one we used to call the office before the desk disappeared under a pile of her unopened packages. I made myself a little corner of peace with a lamp, a chair, and a blanket. I slept better that night than I had in months. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But the game had changed. And this time, I had the playbook. I thought the hardest thing was to leave. But it turned out that the most interesting thing started when I decided to stay. I wish I could tell you things calmed down after the binder. That Tiffany saw the light, got a job, and started pulling her weight. But that's not what happened. What happened was quieter, and in its own way, more exhausting. She didn't explode, at least not right away. What she did instead was stew. The first 2 days, she pretended like it was a misunderstanding. Like I just had a bad week and would come around. She made small talk, tried to laugh at her own expense, even offered to make coffee one morning, using my creamer, which in retrospect felt symbolic. I responded politely, then retreated to the guest room, where I'd started nesting like a squirrel prepping for a long winter. I called my friend Kevin the third night and told him what was going on. He's not a therapist, but he's good with practical advice. Make a comfort corner, he said. You're living in enemy territory now. You need one space that's all yours. So I did. Clean sheets, soft blanket, a little lamp from the closet. I brought him my favorite mug and a small speaker. I started sleeping with earplugs. Peace became a project. Tiffany didn't like the distance. At first, she kept trying to bait me into conversations, some sincere, most theatrical. But I stuck with the gray rocking. Polite, dull, emotionally beige. I gave her nothing to hook onto. And that's when the mask really slipped. One night, she came into the kitchen while I was microwaving leftovers and unleashed everything she'd clearly been bottling for years. Called me cheap, pathetic, a financial abuser. Said I'd never made her feel like a woman. That she'd only stayed with me out of pity, and I should be grateful someone like her didn't walk out years ago. I didn't even flinch. Honestly, it felt like clarity. Finally, she was saying what she really thought instead of dressing it up in passive-aggressive jokes and weaponized silence. And I realized something strange. Hearing her say it all out loud made me feel lighter. Like I wasn't crazy after all. Like all those little moments I had brushed off or excused were exactly what I thought they were. After that, we entered the Cold War phase. 3 weeks of polite distance. She cycled through personalities like trying on outfits. Some mornings she was tearful and soft-spoken, asking how my day had been, if I wanted anything from the store. Never went. The next day, she'd be ice cold, moving through the apartment like I didn't exist. Then, just as suddenly, she'd ask for help with her resume, claiming she was serious about looking for work now. I helped her once, briefly, but after the third revision turned into a, "Can you just write it for me?" I stopped engaging. Meanwhile, the money dried up. About 2 weeks after I'd switched the direct deposit, it started catching up to her. First, it was a takeout order, credit card declined. She acted confused, like there must have been a mistake. The next day, it happened again while she was shopping online. Then came a notification from our shared calendar. Car insurance due in 2 days. That used to be her domain. I let her handle the payments as a kind of gesture, like tossing her the keys while I steered the boat. But now the shared account had maybe $47 in it because I'd only kept enough in there to cover my half of the bills. No padding, no buffer, no bailout. Reality started tapping her on the shoulder, one declined transaction at a time. 3 nights later, she cornered me in the kitchen. "What did you do?" I was standing at the counter, pouring cereal into a mug because I didn't want to do more dishes. She came in fast, eyes sharp, arms crossed like a detective from a bad TV drama. "What did you do to our money?" she repeated louder. I stayed calm, told her what I told her before. "I pay my half. Rent, utilities, groceries, insurance. The rest is on you now." She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You can't just leave me without money." "I didn't," I said. "I left you with a choice." I thought for a second she might actually hit me. Her hand twitched. Her jaw clenched. She stepped forward and then stopped, probably realizing it wouldn't get her what she wanted. Then she turned around and stormed off. I finished my cereal in silence. The next morning, I found a note on the counter. "Go and stay with Bethany for a few days to think about things. Don't text unless it's important." The handwriting was neat, dramatic loops on the capital letters. She took her laptop, her makeup bag, and a carry-on suitcase filled with what looked like 10 days' worth of clothes. No goodbye, no apology, just gone. And you know what? The apartment felt bigger. I hadn't realized how much space her anger and entitlement had been taking up. Not just emotionally, physically. The tension in the air had been so thick, so constant, that her absence felt like someone had finally cracked a window open. I could breathe again. I walked into the living room and stood in the middle of it for a long time, just listening to the silence. No ring light buzzing. No influencer voice echoing from her phone. Just quiet. I didn't fool myself into thinking it was over. But it was a shift. That same day, I called a lawyer. Someone recommended by a coworker. No frills, no nonsense. She spoke clearly, listened well, and told me exactly what I needed to hear. "You're in a strong position," she said. "Don't do anything drastic. Document everything. And keep your composure. This part's a chess match." That night, I went back to my comfort corner, put on some lo-fi music, opened a book I hadn't touched in months, and sat back with a cup of tea I didn't have to justify. There was no great triumph yet, no dramatic finish line. But I wasn't surviving anymore. I was choosing. Choosing calm over chaos. Truth over illusion. Myself over her. And for the first time in a long time, that choice didn't feel selfish. It felt like freedom arriving one quiet night at a time. It was a Thursday when Bethany texted me. The name lit up my phone screen while I was in the hardware aisle at a big box store, trying to decide whether replacing the broken towel rack was worth the effort or symbolic overkill. Her message was short and to the point. Tiff wants to talk. Said she wants to sort things out. Neutral place? That cafe on 6th? I stared at the screen for a minute before replying. I knew what this was. A performance. One more swing at the spotlight. Still, I agreed. Not because I believed she'd change, but because I needed closure on my terms. And the cafe on 6th? It was public enough to keep things civil. That mattered. The next day, I showed up early. Wore a clean button-down, nothing fancy. Just enough to look like someone who wasn't crumbling. I grabbed a corner table by the window, ordered black coffee, sat with my hands folded and my bag at my feet, the manila envelope inside pressing gently against my ankle like a reminder. Stay grounded. Don't get pulled back in. Tiffany arrived 12 minutes late. Of course. And she looked exactly how I expected. Smudged eyeliner, just enough to suggest crying without actual tears. Hair messy, but in the way that cost time in front of a mirror. That green scarf, the one I once said brought out her eyes, years ago, in a moment of affection I'd long since buried. She looked like she'd walked off the set of a sad movie. The manipulation was so obvious it was almost impressive. She slid into the seat across from me with a practiced sigh, as if life itself had been hard on her since the moment we last spoke. She didn't order anything, just folded her hands under her chin like a student about to beg for extra credit. "Thank you for coming," she began. For the next 3 hours, I sat through what I can only describe as her greatest hits tour. There were the tears, of course, carefully timed, with well-placed dabs of a napkin, never smearing the makeup too much. Then came the promises, new job leads, therapy, budgeting apps. A whole new Tiffany on the horizon, if I just stopped being so rigid. Then the guilt trips. How she'd sacrificed so much to be with me. How everyone has rough patches, and real couples push through it. And then the curveball, Greg, her old coworker. He told me I'm beautiful, she said, voice low, that I deserved better. She let that hang in the air for a beat too long. I nodded. Good for Greg. That's when I reached into the bag and slid the separation agreement across the table. She didn't even look at it, just pushed it back toward me like it was a menu for a restaurant she didn't like. "I'm not signing this," she said. "We can work through this. If you just stop being so difficult about money." I kept my voice even. "It's not about money, Tiffany. It's about truth, about dignity, about the fact that I'm done being the only adult in this relationship." I tapped the envelope once with my finger. "This is fair. I'm taking 70% of the debt. I'm not asking for anything extra. You get to walk away clean if you want. But if you want to fight it, go ahead. Just know you'll burn whatever money you have left on legal fees." She said something else after that. I honestly don't remember what. My mind had already left the building. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out with the same quiet certainty I'd brought in. She was still talking when I left. 48 days passed. I got on with things. Slowly, quietly. I worked, cooked, even started going on evening walks, which I hadn't done in years. I didn't hear much from Tiffany beyond the occasional angry or pleading text, all of which I logged and forwarded to my lawyer without response. It became routine. Then Bethany messaged again. "Hey, can we talk?" That surprised me. We met at the same cafe, but this time I arrived second. She looked nervous, like someone who knew she was about to say something uncomfortable. We sat. She didn't waste time. "I owe you an apology," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "I believed her," she continued. "All these years, I thought you were the problem." She painted you as this lazy, emotionally distant guy she was stuck supporting. I even felt sorry for her. She pulled out her phone. But after she crashed at my place, I started seeing things. And then I saw these. She handed the phone to me. Screenshots. Tiffany in a group chat with her circle of friends, bragging about how she trained me to pay all the bills. Photos of shopping sprees, caption hubby's clueless, haha. Texts where she laughed about pretending to job hunt, while binge-watching shows all day. One message simply read, "He actually thinks I'm looking. I should win an award." I felt numb, but not shocked. Not anymore. Bethany looked down, then back up at me. I had to see it for myself to believe it. She's not who I thought she was, and I can't keep pretending I don't know. If this goes to court, I'll testify. I'll say everything. There was a silence between us after that. Not awkward, just real. I nodded. Thank you. That means a lot. Bethany left first. As she walked out, I watched her pause to take a breath, like someone stepping out from under a long shadow. When I got home, I sat in my comfort corner and opened my binder again. Page 31 still looked the same. The excuses, the promises, all there in black and white. But now there was something new. Not just proof, but validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. The gaslighting, the freeloading, the slow erosion of self-worth. I had seen it for what it was. And now someone else had seen it too. I closed the binder, exhaled, and realized something simple and powerful. I had been right to walk away, and I wasn't walking back. About 4 weeks after the cafe meeting, Tiffany's fantasy started to collapse. Credit cards? Maxed. Bethany? No longer so generous. Turns out, living rent-free loses its charm when your house guest spends all day complaining, ordering food, and using your skincare like it's a community resource. Bethany told her, politely but firmly, contribute to the rent or find somewhere else to stay. And her parents? They were done too. I don't know what version of the story she fed them, but apparently it didn't land the way she hoped. No more checks in the mail. No more emergency wire transfers. That's when the calls started. 4 or 5 a day. Sometimes 6. My phone buzzed like it had a guilty conscience. The voicemails were a whiplash mix. 1 minute she was sobbing, telling me I was the only person who ever truly loved her, that she was finally ready to grow. The next, she was venomous, accusing me of abandoning her, saying I was heartless, cold, and, my personal favorite, nothing without her. The texts followed the same rhythm. A carousel of contradictions. I miss you so much, my love. I hope you die alone with your spreadsheets. We can still fix this. You'll end up bitter and miserable, and everyone will see the real you. I followed my lawyer's advice to the letter, documented everything, responded minimally when necessary, and never engaged emotionally. I saved the messages, forwarded them to my email, and kept my peace. And with each passing day, that peace got a little easier to maintain. Eventually, we scheduled my move-out day. I'd held off gathering my final things, mostly sentimental stuff I hadn't wanted to look at. A few old books, a framed photo from a trip we never should have taken, and some clothes I'd left behind in the chaos. She told me she'd be at a job interview. Convenient timing. But when I arrived, she was there, sitting on the edge of the couch in full makeup, her legs crossed, holding a manila envelope like it was the final scene in a movie she thought she was still starring in. "Hi," she said, with a little smile. I didn't sit down. She held out the envelope. It's signed. No changes. I took it, scanned the front page. She wasn't lying. I didn't ask why, but I found out later from Bethany of all people. Apparently, Tiffany met someone, a man from some happy hour, the type who wears a stylish watch and refers to his car by name. She told him she was trapped in a marriage with a cruel, distant man who drained her spirit. He believed it, offered her a place to stay, a fresh start. Suddenly, finalizing the divorce became her top priority. Funny how that works. There was no fight, no drawn-out battle, just a pen on paper and the quiet thud of a door closing for good. When the divorce finalized, I moved into my new place, a small, tidy studio with creaky floorboards and a view of the parking lot. To someone else, it might have looked like a downgrade. To me, It felt like the first breath of fresh air in years. I bought a secondhand couch, a little dining table, cookware I didn't know how to use, but was determined to learn. I downloaded a budgeting app, rebuilt my emergency fund one paycheck at a time, and started meal planning like I was training for a financial marathon. I started making food that didn't come in a wrapper. Burned a few eggs, sure, but I got better. Cooking turned out to be less about food and more about reclaiming a routine that was mine, start to finish. I reconnected with my younger brother. Rejoined an online gaming group I hadn't talked to in years. We started a Saturday night session, just like we had back in the day. There's something remarkably healing about shouting over headsets with people who don't want anything from you except your attention. One Friday night, I bought a ticket to a concert. Just one. No guilt, no second guessing, no explanation needed. I stood in the crowd with a slice of greasy pizza in one hand and a soda in the other, watching the band play a song that used to be on repeat when things felt simpler. And I felt it perfect, ordinary contentment. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. And after 6 years of walking on eggshells and trying to stretch every dollar across two people and one growing void, peace was everything. I still think about that night with the convenience store meal, the pasta in the trash, the words that peeled away the last layer of denial. That was the beginning. That was the night I realized I wasn't losing a marriage. I was waking up from one. There's no grand ending here. No revenge. No epiphany that makes it all neatly worth it. Just the quiet, steady return of self-respect. The slow repair of a life worn thin by someone else's weight. If you'd asked me a year ago where I thought I'd be, this isn't it. But now I'm free. And that's enough.